Our second reading this morning is by Sam Pickering. Beyond the no trespassing sign, wonder thrives, where one wrestles with language and thoughts, not to win or fool, but to celebrate. Inside, I often listen to myself, and occasionally I think sound knowledgeable. Outside, amid the quiet of bird, leaf, and stream, I know better. Our sermon this morning will be given to us by Jake Tidmore.
Thank you, John. My thanks go out to the following. To John Hill for serving as the pulpit assistant today. I love hearing his voice. It soothed me right at the start, and I appreciate that. Lori Prudhomme-Smith for playing such wonderful music. It is indeed an honor to serve with her in your music program. I am humbled to work with the gifted musicians you have in this church. To my wife, Annalise, who helped me craft this talk into something better and more meaningful, and who is probably glad this is the last time she'll have to hear it. And one more cheerful note. Next Sunday, Reverend Jan is returning to the pulpit. After hearing me speak today, you might be even more eager to have her back. However we look at it, it will be good to have her back home. The full title of today's talk is Trespassing, Boundaries, and a Dead Body. And I think Karen was hesitant to put the "and dead body" in there as a title, you know what I mean. I am going to trespass right at the start and break a boundary by giving you the moral of the story first. Be careful, but not afraid. I was talking to a few members of the church right before the service started because I had this brilliant idea that one boundary we all know for sure is fashion. You can think of so many things that you have to abide by because it's fashionable to do that, or because that's what other people say we have to do. For example, these fashion statements, I bet you could fill in the blank. Don't wear stripes with plaid, okay? Don't wear white after Labor Day. The bride always wears white. It's already there. You sense what I mean about we already have boundaries, just even with the term fashion. I was talking to Cater, and she said, well, the symphony, we wear black, so the people will recognize the music and not focus on us. It's been done that quite a while, and I'm sure that when you think about when you go out, you dress up in your Sunday best. Another boundary you take on. Women, I was talking to somebody else, I believe Liz, about the number of churches where the women have to cover their heads, or the men wear yarmulkes in the Jewish church, or various things like that where there's so many fashion traditions just within the religious community. How many of you remember when you got on a plane and you were dressed up? Aren't you glad those days are over? Okay. On a final note, to give you some positive things, I do remember that when I get done talking about boundaries today, I'm only going to cover just maybe one or two of the millions of boundaries out there. But if you want a good boundary, if you want to look good, stand up next to myself or Rich Roy. The contrast will make you look better. Okay. I would like to start my talk with two key issues that are stirring up emotions and fears in our times: boundaries and trespassing. To keep your attention, I will also tell you a tale about finding a dead body. But first, to the topic of trespassing. Sam Pickering, the essayist who we heard earlier, he was the model for the educator played by Robin Williams in the film Dead Poets Society. he offers this advice: be willing to trespass far enough to marvel at the ordinary. Days are a series of small joys, and life itself is wondrous. Okay, let's start the story about the dead body. It was the year 1962, during a blistering hot summer. We lived a few miles outside of town at the end of a dirt road. The nearest home was a half a mile away. The most common plants in the area were weeds and sticker burrs. Besides an occasional stray dog or cat who stuck around, our pets were mostly horned toads and scorpions. And we played with them, I'll guarantee you that. And my younger brother David and I had a secret only we two shared. We were about to solve the mystery of the dead body. There was a small lake in the valley down below the old wooden house we rented. The rutted dirt road down to the lake went by our house, through a gate with a rusty "No Trespassing" sign, and ended at a small patch of the water where the dead body was hidden. Now, as soon as this thought took a hold in our heads, my younger brother and I were trapped by its implications and by its mystery. What had initially been the murky outline of a sunken boat lying near the lake shore beneath 4 or 5 feet of water had become a crime scene in our imagination. We just knew that underneath this overturned rowboat in these shallow waters was a murder victim. Who knew how long the gruesome remains of this evil deed had been concealed until our keen, nearsighted eyes penetrated those few feet of water one afternoon. Do you remember the slogan from Star Trek? To boldly go where no human has gone before. In other words, to bravely cross those boundaries, to trespass into the unknown, basically to have an adventure. But, as all parents and children know, if your mom has gone before, expect a sign that says, "No, absolutely not." I've been here and I know better than you. They didn't tell you about that on Star Trek. "Captain, yes, Mr. Spock, you cannot go there. Mom says you can't do that." There are some important boundaries, some no signs that are necessary for the happiness of children. Most importantly, do not trespass against their innocence. Absolutely not. You have to be careful with all human beings. The reasons boundaries are so tricky is because different people have different boundaries, and they change all the time. And if you aren't able to recognize and respect a person's boundaries, you will probably offend them. You have to be careful with boundaries, theirs and yours, nearly all the time. Think of your space. Think of what you find acceptable and unacceptable. Pickering phrases it nicely. You may cross the hedges, but don't go through the briars along the path. Now, despite all these tricky borders, I'm going to urge you to trespass, but with this proviso from Pickering. When I climb a fence, I do so with care. He does not tolerate rudeness, using harsh language with children, harming the small things of this earth. And who knows, maybe some among you agree with Pickering that it is wrong to ignore the rules of grammar and writing. I'm sure there's a few English teachers among you going, "Amen, amen." These and other trespassers are violators. They are not explorers, not seekers. So much for Pickering right now. I do love the man, but I do need to get on with my story. Normally, my brother and I were not ones to tear off into the woods looking for adventure. Mother had us on a short leash, especially me. I had almost died from breathing problems when I was a real small infant. And the year before, I had almost drowned in a stock pond nearby. Between her fears and my fears, I had plenty of reasons to think that safety ranked with cleanliness when it came to living a godly life. So one dry year had followed another, and the lake level steadily receded during this time. As the upturned boat became more and more visible, my brother and I realized that the chance to prove or disprove our suspicions needed to be taken before someone else beat us to it. The only thing holding us back, our boundaries, so to speak, were the excuses we made. The boat was still partially underwater. The enterprise would be messy. Mother would have a conniption fit. And worst of all, did we really want to find a dead body? Now hit your pause button. We're going to go back to Pickering. I do like, as I said, he's a wonderful man to read. What is the advantage of trespassing? Pickering says, trespassing confines us to the present. We're alert to the moment. We don't dig up the past. We don't tote the future. We're in the here and now. There are times when you need to live in the here and now, not in daydreams while taking a test, not in your favorite song when you're driving down the road, not in worries about bills when you play with your children. Actually, many of us have experienced that here and now feeling. Actors, musicians, athletes, speakers, to name just a few. Now, for those of you who've spoken at this podium, were you not immediately in the here and now when you lost your place on the page? I've seen it, and I know you have too. Now, you know who are the real specialists in the here and now? Babies. I want it here, I want it now. Who ignores the word no and dashes off to wherever they please more quickly than little children? They are the world's best trespassers. Now, speaking of the here and now, let's get back to the story. It's a bone dry summer. Mother is busy in the house with the 4 foster girls, so my brother and I decide we're going to sneak out to the field and go down to the lake, and we're going to find out the truth. Just as we got past the gate, an eastern racer shot out of the tall grass and spooked us. Tingling with the excitement of the snake's sudden dash across the path, we ran even faster down to the water. As we got nearer, we could see that much of the lake was no longer there. Wide stretches of dried mud and dead plants lay where the shallows used to be. And stuck there like an archaeological find was the overturned boat, partially rotted, baked into the dry muck. My brother and I realized our chance had arrived. If what we thought was true, we would be heroes and the envy of our friends. Mother's worries were forgotten, and the only thing slowing us down at that moment was getting our skinny little arms to lever that boat right side up with a discarded piece of wood from the old dock. Finally, the boat began to shift upwards. We strained our puny little muscles to the utmost. With a last mighty push, the boat flipped over. No dead body. Now, I'm not sure whether we were relieved or disappointed. Probably a little of both. We poked about in that area that had been covered by the upside-down boat, hoping that something more might turn up, something more interesting. But without a corpus delicti, as the cop shows call it, well, I hate to say it, but that's where our detective careers ended that day on that sun-dried spot. Now, I want to look at an old, well-known story to help us confront personal barriers, probably the most real barriers in our lives, and see if we can trespass beyond them. And then I've got just 2 or 3 more paragraphs and we'll conclude my tale. The Good Samaritan is a familiar parable from the Bible. I'm going to use it to test your boundaries, your invisible walls. First off, a thought from Martin Luther King Jr. The first question which the priest and the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? The Good Samaritan reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? Aren't we hearing echoes of these 2 statements in politics today? Since the Good Samaritan story is so well known, I won't retell it. Well, not in its usual format anyway. Instead, I will tell you the old story with new characters. See how you react. See where your hedges and briars are. See who your neighbor might be. There once was a man driving home from work on a rural road in Arkansas, several miles from the nearest house. A stray dog ran in front of his car. Swerving to miss the animal, he lost control of the vehicle and drove into the ditch. The man, slightly injured and disoriented, managed to climb out of his car and tried to figure out what to do in his confusion. By the way, he had left his cell phone at home. You have to add that to these old stories, these modern touches, you know. An evangelical minister came driving by on his way to midweek Bible study. Because he was running late and going fast, when he saw the crash victim, he kept on driving. But he said a quick prayer for the man. A bit later, a Republican city councilman happened to pass the crash site on his way to a council meeting. In a hurry, he stopped just long enough to hand a business card to the injured man and said, "Here's a local tow truck service," and continued on his way. Still later, an immigrant worker came by after having put in a long day at a local farm. Seeing the crash victim, the immigrant took pity on him and stopped. He bandaged the man's wounds with what he had. Using his cell phone, he called the towing service listed on the card left by the city official. Now, when the truck arrived, the immigrant helped pull the vehicle from the ditch. He paid the truck driver, and then he drove the injured man to the hospital. Now, let's explore additional changes and see how we feel about them. In the role of our hero, the Good Samaritan, let's put a foreign refugee, a homeless veteran, someone wearing a Gay Pride or Black Lives Matter t-shirt, a trans man or woman, a Muslim, an atheist. Oh, how about the Samaritan as a person who sets off our alarm bells, a person we despise, a person who makes us uncomfortable? Let's say the Samaritan turns out to be someone who has stickers on the back of his truck that say pro-life, pro-gun, heritage, not hate, ban women's lib. But with a heart stirred by compassion, he stops to help someone lying unconscious by the side of the road. What if the first passerby on the scene is a libertarian who says, people need to rely on themselves and not others. It's not our duty to take care of those who won't help themselves. Or let's try this one. And I bet you I test your boundaries on this one. A Unitarian comes by and immediately tells the injured man that he'll definitely help him as soon as he can round up a committee to decide what's best to do. And if this guy can just wait a little bit longer, they'll fix some nutritious vegan soup that'll really help him recover. Did I hit some invisible walls? Do y'all hear some alarm bells going off? Actually, I'd like to think that Unitarians are not people who shirk their duties as good neighbors. In fact, I'm pretty certain they're among the world's standard bearers when it comes to being a neighbor to all the humans they meet. But we are human. We do have boundaries. It's a human characteristic. I think it's written in our genetic makeup. The essayist Greta Ehrlich wrote, "Today, I'm filled with longings for what I'm not, for all the other lives I can't lead, for people I love who can't be in my life, for what is impossible." So, in seeking to satisfy their longings, two small boys tipped over a decrepit rowboat and discovered only their active imagination had been busily at work. And yet, that search brought out a more important find. My brother and I reaped the rewards of a shared moment, rich with fun and adventure, silliness and regret, a hint of danger, a taste of the forbidden. To this day, that experience remains part of our family lore, evoking much humor and drama with each retelling. On the way back to the house, we laughed about our adventure and the years we had spent speculating about the body underneath that boat. Seeing Daddy by the gate, we ran to him and told him about our mystery by the lake. He laughed with us and told us to let him know anytime we suspected the whereabouts of other dead bodies. Seeing that our investigation had left us relatively clean, Daddy said we had better join him on the other side of the gate. Before heading back to the house, he dusted us off a little more. Then he confided to us that if Mother ever learned about our escapade, she would not laugh, and the first dead body ever found near the lake would be his. So my younger brother David looked up at Daddy and asked, "Do you think she'll put you under the boat?" Like I said, we had an active and persistent imagination. I want to thank you for the time to test your boundaries. And just remember that the most important boundary you need to test is the one within.